All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
It is the Mark Thompson Show. I'm Kim McAllister, in for Mark Thompson today. He's in Washington, D.C., visiting with family. And so here Albert and I are manning personing the show once again. So hello, everyone. We've got a great show on tap today. Gil Gross will be on the show. He has so many titles that I don't know which one to use. It could be news guy, broadcaster, talk show host, personality. I'm not sure, but Gil Gross is amazing. And so we'll talk politics with Gil Gross, always knowledgeable, and I'm looking forward to sitting down and visiting with him. David Katz, our former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, is on the show, and how fortuitous, because there's so many legal cases. I just saw another one fly by that Trump is trying to get sanctuary city money that he doesn't want to give sanctuary cities. There's a federal court case regarding this. He's trying to get that money stopped, the flow of it stopped. So we'll see what the courts say about that. We're running by David Katz as well. So the show is going to be a good one. It's going to be full. And Albert, I think we're going to start it on a positive note as well.
I think so.
Yeah. Let's do it, because it's there's something to be said for starting things off on a hopeful note. And I saw Pete Buttigieg on a podcast. He was on comedian Andrew Schultz's podcast called Flagrant. And he went on this run where he described his vision for what he sees for America. And I thought that would be a great way to start the show. Let's take a look.
I want everyday life to be better.
That's what they want too.
You get up in the morning. Yeah, but importantly, like, all the controversies are over what that's like. Like, I want you to be able to get up in the morning, and the first thing you do is you commute to work. And by the way, if you're on an EV, I want that to be affordable for you. Or if you're on public transit, not to get back into the subway situation, but I want you to have good public transit to get to where you're going. And then when you get to that job, I want you to be paid well. And if you're about to have a kid, I want you to know that you're going to have parental leave when you have that kid. And if you don't want to have a kid, I want you to have the right to choose whether to have a kid, which means access to birth control and abortion and those things that give you the freedom to decide on that. And if you already have a kid, when you pick them up at school, I want that school to be good, not having its funding slashed while they set fire to the Department of Education. And then when you get home, I want you to be in a neighborhood that is safe and where you can breathe the air, because we didn't let them get rid of the Clean Air Act. And you don't have to think for one moment about whether the air you breathe or the water you drink is clean and clear, which actually takes a lot, because it means the government has to constrain those actors that would make you unfree by polluting the air and polluting the water. And then when you go to bed, I want you to know that your family's going to be fine, even if it's family like mine, despite there being some Supreme Court justice who wants to obliterate your family because it doesn't match his interpretation of his religion. Like, that's the life I want everybody to be able to live.
Yeah, I think we can deliver that.
He thinks we can deliver that. That's the America I want to live in. I want to live in Pete Buttigieg's America. Let's do that. Absolutely. Sign me up for all of that. I adore Pete, says Kimberly. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love the ideas that he's putting forth there? Could that be delivered? I don't know. He went on to say that Republicans looking at tackling these issues have this attitude of burn it all down. He said, if we haven't solved it properly, their answer is we're going to slash Medicaid. He said, if you think the answer is to just cut it or to just privatize it, that's not the answer. And we can do better than that. It's one of many voices emerging as a potential leader in 2028, along with AOC, and still Kamala Harris topping polls of people Democrats would like to see take a run for the presidency in 2028. I feel like that positive message is so important when we have to move on to other stories like this. We have uncertainty in the world. We have war still raging, and we had a major attack overnight. President Trump says he's not happy about the attack that happened overnight. Russia mounting a big attack against Ukraine, dropping bombs on Kyiv. The Truth Social, the place where apparently you go now, has been for a while, to figure out what Trump is saying. And he said the strikes were not necessary. They came at a very bad time. He said we're almost to a peace deal. And so he writes, stop, Vladimir. He wants Putin to stop the violence. He wants to get a peace deal done, he says. This is a deal that was supposed to be done on day one. All he had to do was pick up the phone, and it's turned out to be a lot more complicated than he ever imagined. Yeah. Again, you can see here, this is what it looked like overnight in Kyiv. Ukraine's Air Force says about 70 missiles fell early this morning, 100 Russian drones targeting that city. Ukrainian officials say at least 9 people were killed, many more injured in this assault, which targeted dozens of different locations around the city of Kyiv, including residential buildings. And this attack is marking the deadliest on this city since July, when 36 people were killed in an airstrike there that targeted a hospital and a residential neighborhood. So I don't know how close we are to a peace deal when the bombs are still falling on the capital city of Ukraine. Trump says we're nearing this peace deal. I don't see it. I don't see it. We'll talk to Gil Gross about it coming up. Meanwhile, over at the White House, there's some infighting going on, and people are yelling in the hallways. This is some angry voices. No, they're not using their inside voice at the White House. The White House is calling it healthy debate. There are reports of Elon Musk and Scott Bessent having a screaming match in the hallway. It was originally reported as a power struggle, but apparently it's getting pretty volatile there. There's a lot of disagreement among the president's staff. Caroline Leavitt is calling this part of the healthy debate process. You know, this is just how it all shakes out at the White House. Here's what she had to say about it.
There are disagreements amongst the president's staff and cabinet sometimes, but we think that's part of the healthy debate process. And everybody knows that ultimately President Trump is the decision maker.
Healthy debate process, screaming matches in the hallway. It sounds like a little more than a healthy debate process. The New York Times called it a power struggle, that it was happening between Bessent and Musk ahead of Trump replacing the head of the IRS. The story it goes that Musk went over Bessent's head to get someone in that role, shapely in that role, even though Bessent is the one that oversees the IRS. And he's not happy that someone stepped over his authority there to try to get who they wanted in that role. So this turns into a screaming match. There were F-bombs flying in the hallway at the White House. Basically, the reporters privy to the information said it was 2 billionaire middle-aged men thinking it was WWE in the hall of the West Wing. They weren't physical in the Oval, but the president saw the whole thing go down, and they carried it down the hall. And that's when they did it again. Why are you yelling indeed? They said it was quite a scene, and it was quite loud. A third witness said really loud. Elon was shouting and rambling. Scott Bessent wasn't putting up with it. This is ugly.
Day, sir.
Caroline, good old Caroline Leavitt, said it's no secret President Trump has put together a team of people who are incredibly passionate about the issues impacting our country. Disagreements are a normal part of any healthy policy process, and ultimately everyone knows they serve at the pleasure of President Trump. So watch your backs, people, and maybe stop screaming in the hallway. But Musk, who just announced after a major earnings drop at Tesla, 71% drop, announced that he's going in the month of May to 1 or 2 days focusing on government per week. He's apparently had some run-ins with other members of the Trump administration. He and Secretary of State Marco Rubio don't get along. He and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy have had issues with each other. And so you put all these people that are really volatile in one place, and heads are butted and clashes are happening, and apparently F-bombs are being dropped in the hallway, and the White House, maybe not such a place to be, a place of peaceful negotiation and diplomacy and, professionalism. They're screaming in the hallway. Has that ever been okay at a place where you work? Employees screaming at each other and swearing at each other? And is that the
I
kind
don't
of
know. Yeah,
no?
probably not.
I mean, I've seen it happen. However, it's not frowned upon, and we don't call it part of a normal, healthy debate. No. Mm-mm. Meanwhile, over at the Pentagon, Albert, they've got a makeup studio now. Yeah. I could do with one here, I guess, but they have this at the Pentagon, and there's some joking around that this is not what you would think of when you think of the military and things like this. But Pete Hegseth, he comes from Fox News. He's used to the TV glitz and glamour, and he needs to have his makeup in place. So apparently he's going against the war culture by having a makeup studio put into the Pentagon. According to CBS News, it cost several $1,000s to do this. And despite the funding cuts, he thought it was important. The studio has apparently some lighted mirrors, a place where is also intended as a green room. And people are joking about this so hard. There's the Lincoln Project put out a post of a clown in a mirror, Pete Hegseth in the makeup studio. It's just, yeah. Here's Ted Lieu, who's a politician. Nothing screams warrior culture more than a makeup studio. He writes, Hegseth was derelict in his duties by repeatedly using his personal phone to disclose ongoing combat operations and is now wasting taxpayer dollars. How does a makeup studio at the Pentagon help our troops? Well, we know what's important. You've got to look your best.
Well, he's trying to get his last few things in before he's ousted. So maybe he's at least he wants to look good on the way out.
He wants to look good on the way out, I'll tell you. I guess they do a lot of interviews at the Pentagon, so it would make sense that you want to have a place to get ready and have your makeup artist there ready for you to do all that. I don't know if that's ever happened at the Pentagon before. I'm gonna say no. Maybe. I'm not
There's
sure.
a lot of things that's happened in the last few years that have happened for the first time.
Nope. Something else happened, and this story came out recently in the last few hours. President Trump is signing another presidential memorandum, and he wants to crack down on foreign contributions to ActBlue. And ActBlue is fund set up by, I think, Democrats, right? Where the money is funneled to different races for Democratic candidates. The order apparently targeting this donation platform of Democrats, asking for documents or information verifying all of the donors. Republicans say ActBlue could be exploited by foreign actors. That's rich. Wasn't it Trump who was accused of taking money from Egypt? Okay, sure. So they say ActBlue can be exploited by foreign actors, that federal law prohibits contributions of any kind from foreign nationals and governments in any U.S. election. ActBlue has stated previously that its security program roots out any unlawful foreign contributions. It seems to me that possibly, and this is just how it comes off, that Trump wants to know the names of every single Democratic donor. And that's scary to me. I don't believe when he says this is about rooting out foreign contributions. I think this is part of the retribution tour. He wants to know who donated, who are the people that are against him. And that to me leaves a really bad taste. I just feel uneasy when you start talking about disclosing the names of your opponents. Yeah. Uh, yeah. We'll see. We'll see if this is stopped by courts, but I'm very unsure and uneasy about this. Not at all. No. And I would think it's not legal too. We have a wonderful contribution here from Chaplain Fred with $20. Hello, Kim Albert. It's all good with Pete, but why was he not considered for president instead of Kamala? Sounds very utopian, but it's only my opinion. Pete sounds real, but I'm still hesitant. Pete, after all, is a politician. Thank you for the contribution. This show does not succeed without your contributions, and so huge that you would do that. Thank you. I would say there's a lot of criticism as to why there was a selection of the former vice president and not a primary. A lot of people say there should have been a primary. There should have been a more democratic approach to choosing a candidate. So you're not alone in thinking that that's the case. Not the way it played out. Who knows? If it had played out that way, maybe we'd have a different result. I'm not sure about that. Thank you for the contribution. Just so appreciate it.
Thank you indeed.
Okay, so I am very fortunate. Again, the titles for this next guest are vast and varied, from news guy, reporter, to talk show host, to personality. I mean, you just broadcaster. You just can't find someone that has done more and done it all very well. I know him from his time at KGO Radio in San Francisco, where I was lucky enough to work in the same vicinity as him. And now I'm fortunate enough that Gil Gross has joined the Mark Thompson Show today. So let's welcome Gil Gross to the broadcast.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Lucky to have worked in the same vicinity as me, really?
Yes, I believe it. Yes,
to even doing it a little.
No, there was greatness. It was like this, these wavelengths of greatness pulsating from your desk, and if you walk by the Gil Gross area, some of it rubbed off. That's how we all felt. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
It's true.
When I leave the studio and go back up to the house, I will be telling Rhoda that she is lucky to be in my vicinity, and that
stand back, or the waves of greatness could touch
the waves of greatness.
That's right.
And so they take the cat litter out.
I think that maybe I left some of your titles off. There are so many. But one of the things I love doing with you the most is talking politics, because you're so knowledgeable. So let's start with this article about Trump calling his critics haters and bad people. And he does it for a reason. He apparently it's a pointed strategy. There are analysts that say it's demagoguery, that this is what he is doing, that there's a lot that goes into it. It is political rhetoric. It inspires emotions. It kind of whips up this frenzy around the people that you consider to be enemies. And it is an effective strategy for him. And it's what he continues to do.
Okay. So my experience with Donald Trump goes back, sad to say, half a century. When I was a New York reporter covering him then, he was a liberal Democrat then. Local reporters, for the most part, there were conservative local reporters, but for the most part, had no animus toward Trump because of his politics. He gave money to the Clintons, who went to his wedding with Melania and all of that. So let me tell you something that we all said to each other 50 years ago. He's stupid. It is, I mean, I remember talking to Barbara Ress, who was, and to his credit, he had a female chief of engineering for his construction, which very few people did. But, you know, I talked to Barbara and she said, you know, I fire people who are incompetent, but Donald likes them, so he gives them their job back. And then I have to fire them in the afternoon, because this would go on all the time. And we would joke about how not bright he was. This was the guy who invited his girlfriend, Marla Maples, to the same ski vacation that he took his wife on. It's not a strategy. Now, does it work? Does it have the same effects as if it were? Yes. Yeah, it does. So you can use all those names, but these experts who say, "Oh, yes, this is very, very carefully planned this because whatever." No, it's who he is. It's always who he's been. He's always attacked. He does ad hominem attacks. True. If you asked him what ad hominem means, he would think it was part of a recipe. Well, you put in the soup, and then you add hominem, and then the manam, and then you put that in, and somebody stirs it, and I don't know. I don't drink soup anyway, so who cares? I mean, that's always been Donald, and I think there's this thing of expert. 2 weeks ago, I got to ask Senator Chris Murphy, who I respect a great deal, a very, very bright man, a good-hearted man, but I asked him whether Trump really thought he could cleave Russia from China, which seems to be part of his idea about getting close to Putin, that Putin will become an enemy of China, when Russia, which is just an economic disaster area, 21% inflation this year, whether, that was a strategy. And Murphy was going, "Oh, well, it's a smokescreen." And I love Chris. It's a smokescreen because, Trump's real thing is this, that, and the other. And nobody could possibly believe that you could separate China from Russia because China gives Russia so much support. And I was just like, they all want to think that the man who's elected president of the United States is smart, crafty, and sly. A lot of people thought that about Nixon, and Nixon was crafty and sly, but Nixon also had psychological problems, which anybody who remembers the speech he gave after he resigned, the one to the White House staff, which dig up recordings of it because it's the most painfully psychologically open moment, I think, of any president. He just starts talking about his mother and all of these things, and you really get an insight into what drove Nixon. And it's just, people want to believe it. You remember the book by Jerzy Kaczynski, where Chauncey Gardner, whose name was only given as Chauncey, he was a gardener, but when he said he was a gardener, people thought, "Oh, that must be his last name." And he ends up being president because everybody wants to see in him a reflection of their own hopes and their own desires, their own prejudices, or whatever. And in the book, he becomes president, and he has a minimal IQ, and yet he becomes successful because people want to see things. I think even Trump's enemies want to see him as a brilliant strategist, a man who has all these ideas. I was reading that article you sent along, and I was remembering, because it kept citing experts say. There's a wonderful book, I took it down off the shelf, by my friend Christopher Surf. It's co-written by Victor Navasky, called The Experts Speak. And it's about all the stupid things experts have said over the years. We'll have atomic-powered vacuum cleaners in 10 years, and all of these things. It's not a strategy. Now, do the people around him use it, as a strategy? Sure. But this is the same Trump we've always had. He gives attacks not because, well, this will set the people back on their feet. He gives it because he doesn't know the facts. You sent me a thing. It was a video of Trump signing all of these executive orders about education. And he has an aide. I've never seen a president do this ever. The ones I liked, the ones I didn't like, the ones I was on.
Albert, this is
at the news conference, explained to him what each thing he was
Right.
signing was.
right, as if he has to be convinced to sign it in the moment. It's very bizarre.
And
Albert,
as if
let's
he
play
has
that
no idea
video.
why he's there or what he's supposed to do.
Here
And
it
then
is.
he does something I've also never seen anybody do. Liberal, conservative, doesn't matter. He then hold it up to show everybody like they could
Yeah.
read the fine print on it. And it reminded me of the moment in Godfather 2 when the Nevada senator, who later gets tripped up by Michael Corleone because he ends up
Yeah.
in a brothel owned by the Corleones, but is doing this proclamation and holds it up to show everybody the same way, even though nobody can read what it says.
No. Mm-mm.
And I thought, oh my God, this is just,
Yeah.
he has to be told
let's
what
watch
he's
the
saying.
video. Let's watch the video, Gil.
Yeah,
Here-
go,
here it
sure.
is. Yeah.
Order on school discipline policies. Under, I believe it was the Biden administration, first Obama and then Biden, the Department of Justice issued guidance that made it almost impossible for schools to enforce adequate disciplinary policies. This created issues in the classroom for teachers and students alike. Basically, they focused on CRT and sort of diversity ideology instead of actually just enforcing the rules in classrooms to ensure a safe learning environment. This executive order revokes that prior guidance and puts us back in a place where hopefully the Department of Education can focus on education and teachers can focus on teaching in a safe environment.
And this was important for you, Linda, as I understand it.
Yeah, absolutely, because it gives teachers the authority now to have discipline in their classroom and discipline the person who is being disruptive.
Oh, well, in that case, I'll sign it.
Yeah. Okay. He has no idea what's coming in.
When
And
you put
then
it like that, let's go
watch
ahead.
the holding up moment because I enjoy this. He does this for everything he signs. There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. We're honoring the Corleone.
Yeah. So
The
that's
whole
what we're
conference
talking
is
about.
like that.
In this case, it's a class discipline. I don't know what that means. As someone with a kid in a classroom, I'm dubious as to what he just signed. But you're right. He does it with every single. There's a proclamation, as if there's an announcing of a king walking into a room. Do 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 do. Here's what you're signing, and here's why. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Look, I wish he were brilliant and evil.
Yeah.
I mean,
You do?
I would. Well, no, but you can tell what somebody's going to do. One of the reasons why a lot of allies, even foreign allies who are allies of Trump, are kind of scared of him is that they don't know what he's going to do. The chaos isn't a strategy. The chaos comes from the fact that there is no plan here.
Yeah.
There's just reacting. Oh, we're doing these tariffs. Oh, wait, a guy from Walmart, a guy from Target, and a guy from Home Depot walk in the office and say, 40% of the stuff in our stores comes from China. What are you doing? Oh, okay, well, I'll peel them back. Yeah, thank you. It's just moment to moment.
And that's what it took. It seems like for him to soften up on tariffs was a video yesterday from the so-called big three, the CEOs of Target, of Walmart, and Home Depot come to the Oval Office and they say, listen, here's what your tariff policies will do. If you continue down this road, the store shelves are going to be empty. It's going to be really bad for business. And apparently, despite all of the top economists in the world telling Trump, this is bad, what you're doing for the economy is bad, it takes the CEOs of America's biggest businesses to come in and say, the store shelves are going to be empty. And as you talk about how he governs, he's very influenced by certain people. He has this thing where, and you never know who is going to incite a reaction from him, who he's going to be influenced by. So it was fascinating that right after he meets with the big three, then he comes out and says, listen, we're negotiating with China. He backs off a little on this aggressive hardline policy that he's had. And it seemed to me like it happened right after that meeting.
It does. There are other factors that came in as well. So usually stock market goes down as it did. And he was, at first, I'm not concerned with the stock market. And he probably did feel that because he probably felt, look, I've got all of this time before the next election, or even a year and a half before the midterms. And I've got time for my things to start to work that I believe will work, even though they wouldn't. And everything will bounce back. I think what caught the attention of some of the people who also believe this, his Treasury Secretary, his Commerce Secretary, was usually when stocks go down, bonds go up in value because people, run to bonds ensure money. And I think what kind of took them aback was the stock market went down and bond sales went down. People were not buying American government bonds because investors were going, I don't know what's going on with the United States. So both were going down, which would lead to stagflation. And I think that caught them by surprise. They still don't quite understand the world economy. They think, and by the way, this is not an attack just on Trump people, because there were a lot of liberal economists 10, 20 years ago who did not understand the effect of credit cards. They were like going back to the 50s and thinking that, oh, well, you know what? I mean, when interest rates go to a certain point, people just stop buying things, because who's going to buy something and finance it at 19.8%? Nobody, except everybody on their Visa and MasterCards. So they didn't understand that. And there were a lot of bad predictions. That came from the left. Also, a lot of people on the left, especially union economists, who did not understand world labor and how much things could be outsourced and how many things could be done in the internet, and thought, well, if you do these things and do tariffs and things, the jobs will come back, and went, oh, there's also this thing called automation and these other things. The jobs don't necessarily come back. So, his people are not alone in using 20, 30-year-old knowledge to completely misconstrue the economy, but you'd hope they'd be smarter.
Well, let's take a look at this video. This is actually a compilation that Mark Thompson sent us this morning about this roller coaster ride that we're going on when it comes to the markets. Let's take a look, Albert.
Break hour begins with the ongoing market volatility taking investors on yet another ride today.
It's been a really rough road. There's been so much volatility, Adam. And I think that investors are tired. Like Ryan says, they want clarity.
It doesn't get rid of the volatility. Some days up 1,000, some days down 1,000, depending on what's coming out of the White House.
How are you feeling today?
I feel like I need a neck brace. The volatility has been insane.
Volatility, roller coaster ride. And I don't know if that is bringing a reaction from Trump, or what finally was the moment that he realized that maybe he needs to make some changes on this policy.
Well, he had a lot of billionaires talking to him about, we want this, that, and the other. And he was going, good, because I'm a billionaire too, so I want what you want. I think the first thing he started to hear in his own ear was Musk.
Yeah.
Going, look, my cars, Musk's first couple of cars were built mainly here. Yeah. But since then, like everybody else, he's outsourcing a lot of things because, there's not enough business for a company to survive and just, making things for America. That may sound ridiculous because of the huge economy we have, but for things like car parts, it's just true. It's true for a lot of things. And then Musk started freaking out about what was going on. Well, people aren't buying the cars, and now I've got Europe that's doesn't want anything to do with anything that I do. Right. And then his stockholders and his own board were yelling at him, "What the hell is going on here?" Because we're getting killed. And China is now making these battery advances, and not so much in the United States yet, anyway, but is building electric cars that are not only taking over the Chinese market, but they're taking over the European market. And Musk especially had hopes for the Chinese market. So first he gets Musk yelling at him. And then, as you said, you get the CEOs of major companies, like Home Depot, where I think 40% of everything they sell comes from China.
Wow.
And probably a lot of the rest has parts or chemicals or things like that from China. And Target, and they're in Walmart, and they're in there saying, you're killing your fellow billionaires. Now he's listening.
Now we got a problem. Once
Now
the
we got a
billionaires are affected, then everyone's in trouble.
Yeah.
You mentioned Elon Musk, and I hadn't planned to talk to you about it, but we saw yesterday Elon is saying it's time for him to step back. You know, the earnings at Tesla for the first quarter of 2025 down 71%. And I think it's people voting with their wallet, looking at this guy who's become the face of the Trump administration almost, and taking on this bad guy role when it comes to making all these government cuts and axing services that people rely on. And his public image is now in the toilet, and his cars are tied to that public image. And so I don't know if, scaling back his presence in government is going to fix the fact that no one wants a Tesla right now, because you drive it down the road and people look at you like, oh, even though you may have bought your Tesla way before you knew what kind of a guy he was.
Yes, we've seen a lot of those bumper
Yeah.
stickers that say, I bought this
Right?
shortly, I went crazy. Yeah.
So Tesla is now synonymous with bad guy.
There was always a weird duality there
Mhm.
in that Musk was advertising Tesla from the very beginning as it's an electric car. You're not going to need that nasty fossil fuel anymore. And well-to-do people on the left were running to buy Teslas. And it's a great car, or at least the early ones were. Okay, the Cybertruck's a disaster, but in fact, I think it was Motor Trend that tested it when it first came out. And this was before Musk becomes this political pariah, and said, we tested the Cybertruck against a Subaru Outback, and this was their actual headline, and the Outback kicked its ass. So there were already some problems going on, because in terms of research and development for the cars, Tesla was now being outpaced by, Polestar and other brands. But there was always this duality that he was pitching the cars to left-wing environmentalists, and now he's pitched his politics to somebody who hates all of those people. So, it would be like the CEO of Kleenex becoming a big supporter of a president who says, wipe your nose on your sleeves, don't use tissues. At some point, you're going to have a problem with your branding.
And I don't think that the people that are hardcore MAGA are really interested in a car that plugs in.
No, for the most part, they're not. Also, when you get outside billionaires, there's this kind of economic gap in the Trump support. Despite the fact he's talking about, cutting Medicaid and all of these programs that help people who are down lower in the economic scale, that's still a huge part of his support. That's a huge part of his support are people who are angry, saying my life isn't as good as it should be. And I blame, in their case, the last 4 years, I blame Biden. And so I'm voting to put Trump back in office. And they're just economically also not a Tesla crowd. You might get some billionaires running around buying them, but they also like Bentleys and cars that it has nothing to do with plugging it in. It's like I got a Maserati.
It's interesting because I drive kids around a lot,
Mhm.
and they have a very strong reaction to the Cybertruck. So if we're cruising around and a kid in the car sees a Cybertruck, they will point it out and yell, and there's a bunch of ews and boos in the car. I've never seen children have a bigger reaction to a vehicle on the road. Even kids are feeling the effect of his public image crisis. So I think it runs deep.
It does. And I haven't seen a reaction to a car's looks really like this since this dates me, and I was a child, let's be nice to me, but when the Edsel came out, and
Nobody liked
which
it?
was described as a car looked like it was choking on a peach pit.
Oh.
And the car would go by and people would make, kind of like fish faces to imitate the front of the Edsel going, things like that. It wasn't calling out, making fun of them, yelling at them and things like that. But yeah, I've never seen anything quite like this.
Well, apparently Musk is not the only billionaire who's upset at everything going on. And we know, as mentioned, that Trump seems to be listening to billionaires. So now we've got Richard Branson, who's the founder of Virgin Atlantic, who is also criticizing Trump's trade policies. He called them erratic, he called them unpredictable and harmful to people around the world. He is talking about the unpredictability being just awful for everyone. Erratic, unpredictable, very difficult for businesses to deal with. Branson said, an unsettled world is not good for anybody. People delay decisions on investment and spending. And he said, if Trump continues, he's in such danger of doing so much damage in the world. We'll see if Trump listens to Richard Branson, but another billionaire voice.
Yeah, he is, but he's a specific billionaire who makes his money from two things. First of all, from international travel, because he gave up Virgin Air, which was the domestic airline, and sold it to Alaska Airlines. So international travel, and right now, a lot of Europeans and others are canceling their travel plans in the United States.
Yeah.
They feel the United States is against them, and they want no part of the United States, and travel is down. If travel is down, Virgin Atlantic is in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much Trump will listen to Branson on that. That's, kind of very specific. The other thing Branson, of course, is involved in is rocketry, although, way behind Musk and SpaceX,
mm-hmm.
as is another billionaire who's a friend of Trump, Jeff Bezos,
with Blue Origin. Yeah,
with Blue Origin, despite sending 7 people up in the air for 5 seconds and bringing them back down, including Katy Perry, who came down and kissed the ground, and she liked it. So Branson's probably also a little ticked off. I'm just saying, I'd like to say his motives are all, political, good-hearted, and they may be. I don't know him. But it's also, Musk has a big in terms of SpaceX with supporting Trump. Bezos it's one of the reasons Bezos has moved in Trump's direction is to try and make sure Blue Origin isn't completely iced out by Musk and SpaceX. And Branson's kind of ticked off, well, the two of them are in there because they're in the United States, and look at me. So I don't think Trump's going to take Branson that seriously, frankly.
Well, it's okay for billionaires to speak out, Gil, but it's not okay for federal workers. Federal workers at the Labor Department got a message that any of them who speak with a journalist will face serious legal consequences.
Yes.
What? Is this America or not? A federal worker can't speak with a journalist?
It's not the America we knew, Kim.
No, it isn't.
It just isn't. And there is, instead of believing, this has always been true of a lot of departments, of course, going down to local police and and other local officers who believe, well, I'm working for the mayor, or I'm in charge of this, and the heck with you. That we're taxpayers. We're paying these salaries, making a law saying that these taxpayer paid people are not allowed to talk to the taxpayers. It's not just undemocratic. It's just wrong on every possible level. But these people who are running, the Labor Department, believe that no, everything is about fealty to the Secretary of Labor and the President of the United States, and not to American citizens. It's kind of like, you lost the election, nya. And if we're doing something that is not in the best interests of American citizens, in the interest of just a few, you have no legal right to tell anybody. Now, look, can they get fired? I mean, some of them have, of course, civil service protections from government unions, and they should be protected to some degree. But to a certain extent, especially with the political people, yes, you can lose your job. If you're working for the Labor Department and you say the Secretary of Labor is an idiot, you can expect to be fired. There are, by the way, Americans that don't understand this. I talk to Americans every day who go, well, Facebook brought down something. What happened to freedom of speech? Well, freedom of speech has nothing at all to do with Facebook or any private organization.
Freedom of speech, it does not mean freedom from consequences. But let me tell you this, Gil. This is this top official in the Labor Department who says that staff members could face criminal charges, not
Yes,
just
and that's
losing
the-
their jobs. Wait a minute. Now you're cooking with fire. There
Yeah.
was a memo sent out by the Secretary of Labor, Lori Chavez de Remer's chief of staff. His name is Ji-Hoon Han, and ProPublica got its hands on this memo. And they say, this is what it says: individuals who disclose confidential information or engage in unauthorized communications with the media may face serious legal consequences, among them potential criminal penalties, depending on the nature of the information and the applicable laws, and of course, immediate disciplinary action up to and including termination.
Yeah. And in terms of criminal sanctions in the Labor Department, you have criminal sanctions for exposing classified information, which I don't believe the Labor Department has any. And Pete Hegseth certainly is not being prosecuted for exposing classified information, and the president himself for keeping it in his bathroom. But can you be fired? Yes. And, going back to the First Amendment means that you cannot be, and this is important, criminally prosecuted by the government for freedom of speech. It doesn't mean that if you're working at McDonald's and you grab the mic and go, hey, what are you doing here? The hamburgers at In-N-Out are better, that you can't be fired. Of course you could be fired. But criminal prosecution for truth telling is something that is undemocratic, probably illegal, although with this Supreme Court, who knows?
Well, we mentioned who Trump listens to, and one of the things I don't think that he pays attention to are his poll numbers. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's pollsters at the White House, and every time a poll comes out and his approval ratings go down, there's reaction and volatility in the White House about what are we going to do about this. But even on Fox News, they had to do a story about the latest poll numbers, and it shows this: that the latest poll numbers show that the approval rating of Trump is far behind every other recent president at this similar point in their presidency. His approval rating is 44% at almost 100 days in office. Joe Biden's at this time was 54%. It was 62% for Barack Obama, 63% for George W. Bush. He's even behind himself. Last time, at this point in his first term, 45% at the 100-day mark. Now we're at 44%. So it's pretty comparable. The thinking is that this is all driven by the economy, that right now 38% of those asked approve of how he's handling the economy, 56% disapprove. So that's really low, the economy approval numbers as well. I don't know if he cares about the
no,
poll
he
numbers,
doesn't.
but,
And I'll tell you, as I see it says down there, Gil Gross journalist, I don't care either. These are snapshots in time. As you get close to elections, they can mean something, not so much from the specific numbers, but by direction. So right now, those polls are going down, but those polls are from days ago when he was still pushing these very high tariffs. Now he's backed off. The market is rebounding. If you were to take that poll tomorrow, the numbers will probably be different. Also, we're a year and a half away from the midterms. And two things about that. One, we're a year and a half from his approval meaning anything as far as, anything practical is concerned. He's still going to be president. He's still going to be driving what he's driving. He's not going to become a liberal progressive tomorrow, be shaking hands with Bernie Sanders and talking, and singing Kumbaya, which is the cliche of what people sing. And none of that's going to happen. And even if you look at the midterms, you've got to look state by state, congressional district by congressional district. And in the end, only the polling there matters. And again, direction. In the last presidential campaign, we saw Harris, still with a slight lead in some polls, even in other polls. But we saw, especially in Pennsylvania, the direction was bad. And that's what you look for. So right now he has a bad direction. But again, those polls are based on when the market was crumbling. Now the market's rebounding. I think those polls are already out of date.
Well, that doesn't matter to Trump because he's going to hold a 100-day celebration. We're going to Michigan and we're going to have a big rally to celebrate the first 100 days in office. I don't remember another president that was into the, like going on the campaign trail and holding these big rallies and events while they're in office and dealing with the business of America. But he's going to Michigan next Tuesday. He's going to rally to celebrate the first 100 days in office. And apparently it's going to be a big to do.
Yeah, it's going to be a big to do. And this early on, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No.
When you get close to an election, even though you're in office and dealing with things, you're going to be out having big campaigns. So I'll excuse him for that, although the timing this early in a term is weird. And the way these things are being planned, especially at a time when he's talking about, how frugal we have to be with spending on people, it's a little like, in Russia, again, where the economy is awful, even going back into the days of when communism was the official language of the Soviet Union then. And now Russia, where you have these, the May Day parades and here come the tanks and everything is celebration. Aren't we great? Yeah, you're starving and you're jobless and you have no food, and you're cold in your apartment. Your apartment's crappy, but look how great we are. And that's a bit how this comes off. But he's very self-aggrandizing and always has been. When he did what was basically a good deed, one of the few he's ever done, when he was in New York City, and the Woolman skating rink was basically the Parks Department was running out of money to keep the skating rink in Central Park alive. He gave money to keep the skating rink alive, for which people loved him. But he insisted it be named after him.
Oh,
that's just always been Donald.
This is just the way it goes.
All his buildings are named after him. It's just his hotels are all. He's very good at branding. That's one of the things. I mean, he's been bad in a lot of business senses. He's lost a lot of money. He's gone bankrupt in businesses, I think 7 times. But he's very good at branding. And branding, self-aggrandizing, in his case, they kind of go together.
I'm reminded of the birthday parade that's apparently coming in June, the military parade from the Pentagon.
That's the thing that really caught my attention more than Michigan, because that is the most like one of those old Soviet parades.
Yep.
Where Stalin would stand there, or Khrushchev, and watching the tanks and everything go by, and look how powerful I am. It's sad. It's really sad.
My time with you is coming to a close, but I wanted to bring up this story because I'm fascinated to see what you think.
Yeah.
And I have some video. There's a young man who is a victim of a school shooting, and he's now ranks pretty high in the Democratic National Committee. And he's got some new ideas, David Hogg, about how we should fix the Democratic Party. That you've got to look at it as what happened in the election and what went wrong and how to revamp the Democratic Party. And part of doing that, that he says, is that we should look at Democrats, even the ones who won and safe districts, but maybe they're languishing there. Maybe they're not speaking up with strong voices. Maybe he feels that they could be dragging the party down instead of being primaried by young, upcoming Democrats with new, fresh ideas who will make the party stronger and move it into this, next election. And so he's thinking it's a good idea to spend money to primary some of these Democrats that are in safe districts instead of taking the money and then focusing it on the races against Republican challengers or Republican other candidates.
Yeah.
He was on a podcast, Brian Tyler Cohen's podcast yesterday, and here's what he had to say.
I think it is possible for us to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. Leaders We Deserve is also focused on supporting candidates that are critical to gaining majorities for Democrats, both in the House and in state legislatures where we did a lot of work last election cycle. So I would say to that comment, right now, we're going to have to spend several $100 million no matter what supporting, and by we, I mean the party in general, is going to have to spend several $100 million supporting frontline candidates that are critical to winning back the majority. If there are young people that are running there that are aligned with our values of leaders we deserve, we plan on supporting them so that we can win back the majority. We also need to realize, though, part of the reason we need to spend that much is because our approval rating is awful. And that goes beyond just what our candidate.
Thank you very much, Albert. I appreciate it. We got to hear some of that. But what the DNC chair is saying is that he wants a proposal to require DNC officers to stay neutral in all Democratic primaries now. And he may force David Hogg to decide either get out of the primary game or lose your post at the DNC.
I have very mixed feelings about what Hogg is saying. And when he talks about, trying to get better candidates, yes, the Democratic Party has been very bad about that. Several years ago, there was a war veteran, I think from the Iraq War, highly decorated, who was running for the Democratic primary and Senate primary in Ohio. And Chuck Schumer, stupidly, said, no, we're not supporting you. It's not your time. So-and-so has been, waiting in the wings all of these years for the race. And the polls showed that this guy, this veteran who was, liberal in his philosophy and everything, was almost a shoo-in to win in increasingly red Ohio. And Schumer shot him down and made sure that no money would go to his campaign from the DNC. And they nominated the guy Schumer wanted, and that guy got killed, got totally murdered. So the Democrats have been very bad about picking candidates who people like, and they've been very establishment. That's all true.
Yeah.
On picking people to challenge Democrats in safe Democratic areas, that's probably not a great idea in terms of getting the vote. If you've got safe votes, look, we're coming up 2026. You're going to have in the Senate, the toss-up races are both Democratic races, are both races where Democrats are in office now. You've got Ossoff in Georgia, and then you've got an open seat in Michigan. There aren't really any Republicans that are in deep trouble for 2026 in the Senate. So if you're going to then undercut with primary battles, Democrats around the country who are in safe seats, you might pick one or two new leaders, but you also might lose some seats that were safe. So in putting a lot of money in those areas where you need, to make sure you win, or you've got a real chance of grabbing a seat. That's true in some House seats. I'm with him. But just getting rid of people who are voting Democratic, who are in safe Democratic seats, is probably a waste of money, and worse, probably a chance for two Democrats in the primary to go at one another, creating fodder for Republican commercials in the main election.
It's definitely not the way things have been done. It's not the way the Democratic National Committee operates. But if something dramatic like this isn't done, then how do you remake the Democratic Party? How do you shake things up so that in the next election, you're fresh and you're new and you're ready for the challenges ahead? If you don't take a look at yourself and make these hard choices, I'm not saying it's right. I am saying that I understand the concept of trying to make change.
I do. But you've got to look at what change. What Carville kept saying to Bill Clinton over and over again, it's the economy, stupid, was the rule. And I saw Democrats on, YouTube and Instagram and all of these things making fun of people who are complaining about the price of eggs, not realizing that a lot of that swing vote, people who weren't doing well, being able to put breakfast on the table was an issue.
Right.
And some of the other progressive issues that they were talking about that still are taking up a lot of time talking about were not big issues for them. The economy was. They wanted to hear about jobs. They wanted to hear about inflation. Democrats needed to get out in front of that, and they were getting out in front of issues that either affected very few people or And now this would start a whole thing. And I know you're out of time, but the issue, for instance, of whether trans girls could compete in high school and college sports.
Sure.
76% of Democrats were against that.
Mm.
Now, you can say, look, we'll get into office and we're going to give a very sympathetic ear to that. And what's a very complicated issue, like the Middle East, and so many issues where Americans read one paragraph of a story and then make up their minds and yell at each other. But there was a thing where a lot of Democrats, 3/4 of Democrats were going, yeah, I don't think so. And that got talked about more by some, not all, but by some politicians than food prices.
Yeah.
And if the party wants to get elected and then do good things for other people by getting into office, they have to concentrate on what people, basically the voters, want to hear and what's affecting most of their lives. And Democratic Party has done a bad job of that recently. And that's where it needs to work harder.
On the way out, I'll ask you this about the White House press corps, which is now filled with right-wing media people who I don't want to put the word journalist after their name, but apparently CNN asked, "Do you consider yourself journalists?" They're asking this to the so-called new media people that are rolling around the White House trying to report on stories, but really only reporting what Trump wants to hear, right? And asking the questions that Trump responds to most favorably. They say, yeah, we're all biased. We just wear our bias, which I think is a pejorative term to begin with, on our sleeves. So they admit their bias. Can we let me roll back. I can't even, because it's so outrageous and so against what we stand for. We can't have democracy without the truth telling in the media. And when you have what now looks like a state media forming, a coalition of people who only want to report what the president's message is and nothing else, and not the truth, I think this is part of us being in real trouble.
One of the sad days of every reporter's gone through it, not even necessarily a political story, is when someone that in your heart you wanted to do well or you supported, privately, does something, you're going to have to report on what a jerk they are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happened to all of us. I remember when the head of Odyssey House, who I knew very well and worked very hard for children and getting kids off the street and all of that, when it came out that he was having sex with some of the older kids.
Oh, God.
And I know. And I couldn't believe it at first. I went, Bruce? No way. I know him. And I was in New York at the time, and the New York Post broke the story. And Jerry Nachman, who was the publisher of the Post in those days, heard that I didn't believe the story, and he called me. He was yelling at me. Jerry was my friend.
Yeah.
But Jerry then did have Charlie Sennett, who's the reporter on the story, call me and say, yeah, Gil, I didn't want it to be true either, but it's true. And, we all have those days. And that's what being a reporter and a journalist is. Mm-hmm. It's like whatever your personal, bias or heart or anything is, you report what's there. Yep. Because that's the job. I think there's a lot of people who don't like that. And I think there's also the problem that we've gotten very loose with the term journalist. I can now just give my opinions and stuff because I'm out of day to day. I still do specials for CBS, but I no longer cover politics. I do them. I'm working on one. Please listen to it across the country.
What are you working on, by the way?
Memorial Day, and there's no politics in it. It's about the lives of our fighting men and women and what's happening with PTSD treatments and all of that. So I can now mouth off when I never would have when I was acting, doing the hourly newscasts and all of that.
As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even register as a party to vote. I always registered as declined to state because I felt like I wanted to maintain that barrier of I don't want anyone to know what I think about anything. Again, that's changed. I'm no longer only, someone who goes out and reports on stories anymore. So that's
Here's
the way
where
to go.
this gets messy. I never would have done the Mark Thompson show.
Right.
I never would have talked to you when I was a working day-to-day journalist reporting on people.
Absolutely.
But then we started doing these roundtables
Mm-hmm.
on Meet the Press and all of these Sunday shows, Face the Nation, and reporters who were reporting the news the rest of the week were giving their opinions. And then we started with Fox News and MSNBC, and then we started calling columnists journalists.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, a columnist wasn't a journalist unless they were a columnist who actually did reporting, of whom there used to be some. Mike Royko in Chicago, Jimmy Breslin in New York. You had some of them, but they were always in the minority. Mostly they were just people spewing opinions. Now everybody's a freaking journalist.
Yeah.
Everybody's a reporter. People go on cable television and go on radio and podcasts and spewing opinions, but still calling themselves journalists and reporters when they're just people with opinions, maybe informed, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've dumbed down the word.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's made this kind of thing, well, yeah, I'm biased, who cares, acceptable in a world where it never used to be. That was always a no-no. If I had gone on a show like this and said all these things when I was a working day-to-day reporter, they would have handed me my papers the next day.
Wouldn't have done it. You had to make a choice when you became a talk show host that, you were no longer a working person telling the stories of the day in the way a journalist would. I remember the day at KGO where they told me, okay, so we need you along with your anchoring duties. We need you to sit along the talk show host and offer opinion. And I had to think about it. That's what they were looking for. So I had to revamp and change. But it was uncomfortable because it goes against the ethics that we're all taught.
Yeah.
Keep your opinions out of it.
No, and I knew when I took the job at KGO, when I was offered the job at KGO and taking it, that I was leaving my reporter life behind.
Right.
I might still do reporting, but using my skills to ferret out facts. But once I became a talk show host, I knew that was now back here somewhere. I did it for various reasons, one of which KGO is like the greatest radio station that ever existed.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, it was able to actually do things about social issues that I could otherwise just report on. We could do something about homelessness when we did the Thanksgiving Day shows, raising money for St. Anthony's and the other charities that were feeding people. And, I kind of felt that instead of being an observer, I could actually do things that could help. But that's a choice you make, and the day you make that choice, you leave that mantle journalist reporter back here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it seems that we understand that, but the folks covering the White House don't understand. They're not journalists. Many of them, not all of them, but the ones that are, from the right-wing media, they're not journalists. They're just mouthpieces. They're just echoing a press release.
And there are people on the left wing like that too,
Yeah.
who say, I'm a journalist, but they don't do any actual reporting. They don't pick up the phone. They just, write things based on what they read actual reporters reporting. And there used to be that line there, and it's gone. And it's sad because it gives people a credibility they don't deserve.
Absolutely. Gil Gross, how awesome that you stopped by the show. I have to tell you that every time Mark Thompson is gone, I'll put in a call to you and say, let's have Gil Gross on the show, get him in there, talk politics. And then I always get a call from Mark Thompson later. Why do you always have him on when I'm not on? I want to talk to Gil Gross too. So I have to book you for one time when Mark is actually in so that you guys can have a great conversation.
Oh, you do the booking.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You're the one.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So I
Well,
always
Mark,
save you
I'll
for
never
myself.
see you.
Yeah, exactly. Gil Gross, thank you so much for stopping by the show. It's always
Thank you,
a
Kim.
pleasure. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for coming
Santa
in.
Claus.
Bye. Bye. Yeah, Kate, exactly. We love you. Bye, Gil Gross.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, Karen says it would be great to see Gil and Mark together. I agree. It'd be a really fun conversation. Two really smart guys. I would love to see that. So maybe I will. You know what? Sometimes I do hold the keys, and I am not apologizing for that at all. I'm glad you enjoyed Gil Gross. I always think he's amazing. So very good. We have David Katz coming up, former federal prosecutor. There's so many legal cases to talk about. I'm telling you. Chaplain Fred with another couple bucks for the Mark Thompson show says, I think Trump played and is still playing Elon. Well, if you listen to what Gil Gross said, Trump is probably not smart enough to play Elon. So that it's that he's not a real big strategy guy. So I don't know. Thank you for the contribution to the show. And it is a great opportunity for me to mention that the show is crowdfunded, and that's how we keep going. And this is a platform that we came to from KGO Radio in San Francisco. Mark's still on KFI in Los Angeles, but we bring the show here to you. So thank you so much for the contributions and for keeping this show on the air. The website is themarkthompsonshow.com. There's Patreon and PayPal links there that allow you to set aside a small amount and donate to the show monthly, contribute to the show that way. Of course, as you saw Chaplain Fred, the super chats and super stickers are open. And a huge thank you to everyone who supports the Mark Thompson Show and again, keeps us in business. So our thanks to you. Karen Cooper also writes, someday real journalists will return and will be appreciated. I would argue that they are out there, that we are still getting in America the truth. There are still investigative journalists that are digging. The hard part is for most people, I think, for many people, is trying to tell them apart, trying to tell the real journalists apart from just people that have an opinion. And there is a big difference. There is a big difference. All right.
Kim, how about we just take a 2-minute break to give you a break from talking for an hour?
I get a break? That's new.
Yeah, just like I'll play a little bump, and then hopefully by the time that bump ends, Katz is a little later than normal today, so hopefully he's just here.
Yeah,
hopefully he's here by the time that ends.
We'll do that, and if he's not here, then maybe we'll do a little news, because I always love the opportunity to do that as well.
That sounds good.
Awesome. It's the Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Feels great, baby.
Let me kick down the door and talk to my cheap sons and daughters.
No context will suffice to explain the hurt and anguish caused by my words. I apologize to all who have been hurt.
I stand corrected. I misspoke. My words upset so many people.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
God bless America. The end.
There's never been anything like this. Do I hit it long? Is Trump strong? Huh?
Who is having that conversation?
It's fantastic.
That's not fake. That's real.
The science is ridiculous.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
If you get it in order, you get extra points.
Listen to me. I don't want to hear you.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
This is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
There is no defense for my conduct. It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
Don't ever use that word.
You get nothing.
What's a guilty pleasure to you about?
Seriously, what the
It is the Mark Thompson Show. Yeah, and guess who has arrived? It is our former federal prosecutor, my favorite lawyer, now a defense attorney in the Los Angeles area, David Katz, everybody.
Great to be with you.
Hi.
Hey.
Oh my gosh. Usually I'll try to find some stories related to the law to send to you and say, this is what I'm planning to ask you or what have you. And it was like an embarrassment of riches last night. Legal story after legal story popping up. And there is so much to talk about. So let's jump right into it, because the first story that I have for you is a dozen states are suing, trying to stop the Trump tariffs. These are states like California that are saying, listen, we're going to be really impacted by this, and that the president does not have the constitutional authority to do this sweeping tariff agenda, which impacts states. The legal challenge led by the state of Arizona, Oregon attorney involved as well. They say by claiming the authority to impose immense ever-changing tariffs on whatever goods entering the United States he chooses, for whatever reason he finds convenient to declare an emergency, the president has upended the constitutional order and brought chaos to the American economy. Any legs on this one?
I don't really think so. The tariffs were a terrible idea, even if Trump was trying to achieve the goal of bringing manufacturing back to America. Number one, it was never going to happen because the labor rates are simply too high here. It was never going to make any sense that we could really undercut other countries. And on top of that, it's a 4 or 5 year plan. And a president who was really popular and who ran on that issue, and Trump ran on so many others, who really ran on that issue and made it a priority, maybe could convince other countries that we were going to stick with it, for years. But it's obviously we're not going to stick with it for years. Trump was probably down at about 45% popularity in the polls when he started this fiasco. Now he's down below 40%. He's in 30-something territory. And it's obvious
the economy,
yeah, it's obvious that when you're in a huge fight with China, and China is going to be stalwart, they're command economy. There's no real freedom over there at all. That the government can press the citizens. You remember how they pressed them during COVID? They put them in camps all of a sudden, and they couldn't get out and had to risk your life and try to swim a river. That's the Chinese command economy. That's the Chinese Communist Party that rules with an iron hand. So they were going to stick with the fight over tariffs a lot longer than we were, with an unpopular president who thinks that, more than half the country thinks it's a terrible idea. So he picked a losing battle. And, he was fairly popular when this started. And I said that I thought this was really it. This was like the fatal bleeding from which he could not recover. And it's looked that way. He's alienated not just Democrats and independents, Kim, but Republicans and rich people. The tariffs are a terrible idea, and they haven't even hit with their impact yet. They're going to be the empty store shelves and everything else. So obviously the states, these 12 states, are very upset about it because they see this disaster that's about to hit their citizens. But the problem legally, you said, does it have legal legs? There's two issues. Number one, is there a true emergency? Wow, it's just hard for the courts to say there's not a true emergency. And therefore, since this is a bogus invented emergency by Trump, it doesn't have any rational basis. It's just irrational. It's nothing but this is exactly what I think Trump is doing. It puts him at center stage. It makes him the star of the show every day. His tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. I do think it's just his, megalomaniacal, autocratic, whims. But I just can't imagine that a court is really going to say that. That issue would go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I just can't imagine 5 of the 9 saying that it is totally irrational to say that there's an emergency that's built up, Kim, I think they would say. Not an emergency like we think of an emergency, but an emergency that's built up as U.S. manufacturing sector and amount of manufacturing has gone down. And so I don't think they're going to say it's irrational. So the second thing is it a violation of the separation of powers? Is this something that Congress is their responsibility and the president's doing something and taking away the authority of Congress? And there, I don't think it's a winner because Congress can handle it in various ways. When we defend these regulatory agencies, we say Congress doesn't have to adjudicate all these things. They don't have all the time in the day or all the people. They can delegate these decisions to regulatory agencies, and that doesn't violate the separation of powers. Well, in this situation, they basically made a delegation to the president to act in an emergency. See, my first point, which I think they're going to lose on. So if you assume that it really is an emergency, then this law kicks in, which says if the Congress doesn't agree it's an emergency, if Congress doesn't think that the president is handling it properly, all they have to do, they don't need the filibuster. They don't need to get the 60 votes to get past the filibuster. They need 51 votes, and because Vance would screw them. So they need 50 votes in the Senate. And that's why I think it was one of the top leaders that I heard the other day said, we are for Senator Whitehouse. I saw him, I think, MSNBC. And he said, we're 4 votes away from stopping this traffic madness. 4 Republicans in the Senate could say this is madness, and 4 Republicans in the House of Representatives, because it's that close, it's razor thin, in the Congress, they could say, stop this madness with the tariffs already, because people are already suffering, and they're going to really suffer when they see the empty shelves and double the price of so many things. So that's where it really is. The Congress gave it to the president in case of an emergency. I think the courts will say it's enough of an emergency. At least it's rational. It's not some totally irrational thing under the law. I mean, I think it is irrational in Trump's mind, but it's not an irrational thing under the law. And then they're going to say they have chosen not to marshal 50 votes in either house to repudiate it, to stop it, because that's what they could have done. The day after he said he was putting these tariffs in effect, or put them in effect, they could have voted 51 to 49 in the Senate, and they could have had 2 or 3 Republicans in the House say, no, we're not doing this. So when they all say, oh my God, what happened? How could we be fighting with Canada? All these Republicans who are along the northern border, all these Republicans who say, how did this happen? How did our economy go in the toilet here? These Republicans are going to say, you didn't vote to stop these tariffs. But all it took was 4 of you in the Senate and 4 of you in the House. You could have stopped all this madness. But they're going to say, if this is how Congress wants to handle it, I think the courts are going to say, they can handle it that way. And the reality is Congress did buy in. Congress bought into this big time, and Congress did this. Your Congress member, your senator did this to you because they refused to exercise their vote to repudiate it.
We've seen the Supreme Court use this before and say, listen, there's another mechanism by which you can fix this. The Congress has the ability to make changes, so why are you bringing it to us type of decision. Yeah.
You can imagine sort of a different situation, I suppose, where they really did give this power to the president and it was fairly unchecked. And then you look at the text of the Constitution, the Congress does have the right to regulate commerce. They do have the right over immigration. One of the things is that Congress has extraordinary power over immigration. But of course, for years and years, they failed to pass that. Remember that joint immigration bill that was about to pass even under W. So anyway, long answer to your very good question. What's the next one?
Sanctuary city funding. There is a push that Trump is trying to deny federal funds to sanctuary cities. I misspelled cities there, so I'll change that. But this judge is now barring Trump from doing this. Sanctuary cities, of course, limit cooperation with ICE agents and immigration. They're supposed to be places of safety where, immigrants can report crimes and not have to feel like if the minute they start talking to the police, they're going to be rounded up and taken away. This judge, his name is Orrick, he said a preliminary injunction is appropriate in this case because the executive orders are unconstitutional, just like they were in 2017 when Trump announced a similar order and tried to deny federal funding to sanctuary cities.
Yes, this is Groundhog Day. This is exactly what Trump did in 2017. It went before, I don't know if it went before this particular judge, but it went to this court, the Northern District of California. And it was decided then that they couldn't cut off funds to sanctuary cities because they didn't allow their police officers or sheriffs to cooperate with federal officials. So, this may go to the Supreme Court. If I remember right, it's a little bit different Supreme Court. It doesn't have RBG on it. It has Amy Coney Barrett, replacing there was a replacement on the Democratic side too, but it was a Democrat for Democrat. So having had that change since then, that may make a big difference. I think Kavanaugh and Gorsuch were there already, but it might, and I don't follow the case in the Supreme Court. I don't know if it reached the Supreme Court, but I'm a little leery that there are 5 votes on the U.S. Supreme Court to say that if you don't cooperate with the federal government in certain ways, that the federal government can cut off your funds. It may depend statute by statute how the statute's written, and it may depend what exactly they're asking the local authorities to do. But at least from the propaganda you hear, some of these cities completely stonewall. I actually had some experience with this. I had a fellow who had no papers at all, but he'd been living here about 15 or 20 years. American citizen wife, 2 American citizen kids, and he goes to a stoplight, and they think that maybe he's drunk, so he spends the night in jail. Now, I think in some states that they would have, that information would have gone to ICE. ICE would have seen that he didn't have papers, and ICE could have. I'm not sure whether he probably was somewhat inebriated, or they wouldn't have kept him in jail overnight. I'm not sure they actually charged him with DUI, but his family realized he needed a good lawyer, and they were petrified about this idea that he'd be turned over to ICE, and daddy of, his husband of 20 years would be sent to his country of origin. Anyway, none of that happened because it never did get reported. And certainly in a case like that, I think almost all of your listeners would say, well, it shouldn't have been. I mean, come on, he was slightly inebriated. At worst, he went through a stop sign, never been in trouble before, so he hadn't had this problem come up. But there's no protection for a person like that. If we'd had an immigration bill and there'd been a way to sort of give him some status after all these years, but there wasn't. And the country, when Trump says there's millions of people here, there's millions of people here who don't have papers, who are living lawfully. If they ever see a police officer have any problem, it's for some traffic violation like that. That's the millions of them have no criminal problems, have the most minor one. And these people, zero tolerance. They would report those people, and that's what they're trying to do in some of the states that'll play along with them. They're really trying to get a hold of those people. They're going around now and arresting people at courthouses. That was one thing that even Trump didn't allow during the first term, but he's made clear that he wants that now, and it's happening now. So they show up at courthouses, and after your appearance, or they try to arrest you. Some judges have said that's not proper. But again, you have to find a statutory basis to tell the feds, no, it's not proper, or they wait outside the courthouse. But they like to do it inside the courthouse for a very simple reason. If you do this often enough, you are going to run into some danger. Someone will pull a knife or a gun, or they'll fight, or they'll try to run away. Well, very hard to do in a courthouse. You've already been through the magnetometer. You don't have a knife or a gun if you're in a courthouse. So ICE likes to try to take people there. And of course, you have the argument that people are then deterred from using the courts at all, because it's not just the criminal defendants. You worry about them showing up in civil cases. You worry about them showing up in divorce proceedings. Anywhere that they know they're going to find the person in a courthouse is a lot safer for ICE agents, right, to take the person in any kind of courthouse. And of course, people are hugely deterred if they have any voluntary aspect of it. And victims are deterred. Who's going to trust that, they'll figure out that I'm a domestic violence victim and not a domestic violence alleged perpetrator. Right. They're looking at everybody's papers over there. I don't think I got beaten up really bad. I really want a restraining order against this person who beat me. But you know what? Not worth getting deported over.
No. Speaking of being deported, let's turn to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. A lot of movement on that case. And now we have a federal judge giving the Trump administration another week to answer these questions about what the process is to get this man who was deported in error, according to the Trump administration, back. The Trump administration says, we don't want this guy back. As a matter of fact, when they had the president of El Salvador in the White House, he said, yeah, there's no way we're bringing this guy back. But the judge still gives the Trump administration more time to comply, and though says some pretty pointed things in response to the fact that there's been no movement from the Trump administration on her orders. Her name is Paula Xinis. She says this, the judge, defendants have failed to respond in good faith. Their refusal to do so can only be viewed as willful and intentional non-compliance. And she wrote, that ends now. She said the administration's arguments are specious, and she's condemning their mischaracterization of the Supreme Court's directive to facilitate Mr. Garcia's to the United States. And so she gives them more time, but she also gives them a little slap down in the process.
A big slapdown. Let me just say a couple of things about that case. First of all, it's very kind of you to call him the president of El Salvador. He describes himself as the world's coolest dictator. And I'll take his word. I'll take his word that he's a dictator. And I bet if you looked at that election down there, you would be stunned, or you wouldn't be stunned if you expected it not to have been any kind of a clean election down there in El Salvador. He also hits me as one of those people who plans to stay in power for a long time. If there ever was an election, let's see if there's a new one. And he's obviously a puppet of Trump. They were gleeful in the White House, gleeful when he said, well, I have no intention of sending that man back from El Salvador. And they were like, well, you see, there's nothing that we can possibly do. Trump, who claims he can tell everybody what to do. He can tell the president of Ukraine what to do about carving up his own country. But this man, this Central American dictator, way beyond the power of weak little Trump to be able to tell him anything what to do. Anyway, turning to the case itself and her order. If you were any lawyer except a lawyer of the Trump administration and a judge said what she said, you'd be on your way to lockup. You'd want to make sure you had your toothbrush and somebody with bail money. That is contempt. That's contumacious conduct. Those are the words that the judge speaks before you get locked up for either civil contempt, which is you have the keys to the jailhouse door, and if by complying with the judge's order. Like, let's assume that she said, tell me who ordered this person to be deported. Tell me who is in charge of making this administrative error. Okay. And you say, I can't tell you that. And she says, I'm ordering you to. And you say, I can't tell you that. They didn't want me to tell you that. I can't tell you that. She says, either tell me or you go to jail. And then when you decide to tell her, when you decide to comply with her court order, then they let you out of jail. That's civil contempt. Or you could also say, she could also say, from what you've done so far, this constitutes criminal contempt, which may be where she's going. By giving them another week, she can say, you really committed a crime a week ago because you did this and that and the other thing that were contemptuous. I gave you a week. In the week, you didn't cure it. You didn't purge yourself of the civil contempt by complying with my order. Now we're up to the stage of criminal contempt. Unless you do it in front of the judge, you're entitled to a trial. But one problem is that at the end of all of that, we talked about this, I think, last week, that Trump could issue a pardon. And there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that says that he can issue a pardon. And if he abuses that power of issuing pardons so that his henchmen can get away with wrongdoing, the remedy is impeachment. Well, we know how well impeachment's gone and removal from office against Trump so far. So that's kind of where it stands. I think in a week, she's going to lower the boom again. And it may be that this is just, stalling for time. And then when she finally issues her ruling in a week, that's the one they're going to take an immediate appeal, the Trump administration. And that one will reach the U.S. Supreme Court. What she wants to know is she wants the names. And they may send a lawyer to court who genuinely doesn't know the names, genuinely does not know who made the administrative error, how this person got on the plane. But if I can just add one thing, because it's gotten so, it's just such a web by now. And I heard even some of the major news outlets were not reporting it correctly. There are 3 planes that are going to leave on Friday night from Texas. It's not from any foreign country. And they're not going to Venezuela, even though it's a Venezuelan gang. They're going to El Salvador, which is a country that very, very few of them are from. Okay, 3 planes. The pro bono lawyers for the deportees, the about to be deportees, are very conscientious. They find out about this order and they manage to arrange a hearing on Saturday with a very hardworking judge who's an old Yale buddy of Kavanaugh. He's no lunatic. He's no left winger. He was appointed to a federal bench first by W and then raised by Biden. So it might have been Trump. It was either Trump, but anyway, he's first picked by a Republican to be a federal judge, and then by Biden to be promoted to the U.S. District Court. So he's the one who says, turn the planes around, remember? And it appears at the time he issues that oral order, which has the force of law, okay? And there were a bevy of government attorneys there. All someone had to do was to walk out of the courtroom on their cell phone, call up their boss and say, call whoever you need to call, turn the planes around. The judge just ordered, turn the planes around. Well, their story is that it wasn't really taking effect until it was a written order, which is really kind of crazy. I mean, it's crazy in common sense, right? An order is an order from an official, unless there's something, that to make you hesitate about it. There was nothing to make them hesitate. So later they came back with the story that it wasn't an order until it was a written order. By the time it was a written order, the planes had taken off and they were over international waters. And what do you expect to do over international waters, which is truly unbelievable because it's an American flight left from America with an American pilot who could turn it around right back to where it came from. It also appears that there's a third plane that hasn't taken off at all yet. That third plane takes off. All of them land in El Salvador. And then Trump says, I'm so powerless. I'm so weak in the international scene. I can't get that Central American president to send them back. Ha ha, ha ha. And of course, the Central American dictator, he sends like, oopsie, oopsie, aren't I a clever little dictator? He's running circles around our constitutional rights. So it's all awful. And these people are terribly sympathetic. All the people that we're talking about now, and there's two different people, were on those 3 flights. So this Abrego Garcia, he was on one of those 3 flights, which is kind of confusing. But the case ends up in front of this Judge Xinis regarding him. The case about all the other people on the planes is in front of Boasberg. And now we have yet another person who's a 20-year-old. And the 20-year-old person, they're still using his name because he was a juvenile. He was part of a settlement. And in that settlement, the U.S. government said, we will not deport these people except if we follow certain procedures which will protect their rights. This guy, who's covered by that settlement, was also deported. So he's another person who was deported wrongfully in violation of the law. His case is yet in front of a third judge. To make it even better, she was picked by Trump, appointed under Trump, right? And even she, the Trumpy judge, has said, no, wait a second. It looks like he was deported. And this one is in violation of the contract made with the government, where the government said, we'll do X, Y, and Z before we deport you. And then they didn't do X, Y, or Z. So all these people.
This is federal judge Stephanie Gallagher that you're referencing, and she's a federal judge in Maryland. She's ordering the Trump administration to facilitate the return of this 20-year-old that they're only using a first name. They're calling him Christian. He's Venezuelan, but he, as you mentioned, deported to El Salvador, and his removal violates a previous court settlement. So she's saying, Judge Gallagher, you got to bring this guy back too.
There'll be more of them, right? Just from what we're hearing, there'll be more of them. That you have to get to the bottom of it. This Garcia Abrego, he has a loving wife. I think he has an American citizen child too. But the loving wife has made sure that he's got good representation. Yeah. And then, of course, that senator went down there and met with him. First, he was given a hard time, not allowed in if this were any case except Trump liked it, he would, this banana republic down there, wouldn't let our U.S. senator visit him. Finally, he did visit him. What I heard, and this may be wrong, is that he has been transferred out of that hellhole. I think everybody realized that because the reason that this person has a federal judge's order that he not be removed from the United States is that he is in danger by this gang. The gang wants to get him. This El Salvador gang wants to get him. So what does Trump do? Trump sends him to El Salvador, to a hellhole prison with no decent security, so he can be stabbed or whatever they plan to do to him, because he's on their list. So I think that everybody realized this guy shows up dead in that prison. Okay, this is on a whole nother level of atrocity by the Trump administration and by this Homan. Homan is another villain in this piece. He's the ICE head who said, I don't care what any judge said. And we talked about that before too, but even in rising fascist countries, I don't think that as Mussolini was coming to power, as Hugo Chavez down in Venezuela was coming to power, I don't think that anyone in their government said, I don't care what the courts say. I mean, they all at least pretend to care what the courts say and kind of moderate their conduct. That's what's so weird about Trump. Trump believes that his supporters just don't care at all. They think this is all great fun. And I guess they never think that it could ever apply to them. Although Trump said on an open mic that I'm sure he wanted to be heard, he said to this Central American dictator, he said to him, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this with some of the homegrown ones? In other words, why don't we do
American
this with
citizens,
U.S. citizens? And there's another story now, Kim. There's another story now about a U.S. born citizen immigration lawyer who got a letter from DHS that said, you better self-deport. This guy, please send me that letter. please send me that letter, David Katz. You need to self-deport. I know a couple of lawyers, okay, and I will give all the damages that I win to charity. But this guy's got $1 million plus lawsuit.
Let me tell you this story. This man's name is Aldo Martinez Gomez. He is an American citizen born in the United States of America, gets this email from the Department of Homeland Security that says, you need to leave immediately. And he's thinking, what do you mean I need to leave immediately? No, he's an immigrants' rights advocate. That's his job. And he says he thinks he was singled out because of his work with immigrants. He's being threatened by DHS with criminal prosecution, civil fines and penalties if he doesn't leave the United States of America within 7 days. He said, I was taken aback. He said, I was born on this side, dude. How are you sending this to me? He said every day he goes to work, he is around ICE agents, and he said he carries his passport card on him at all times, but he doesn't trust that ICE agents won't accidentally lose it. So here's a guy who's constantly carrying his papers because he feels like he's under threat of, being deported. And now he gets this letter saying, you got to go.
I'm sure he's made a copy of those papers, and anybody who thinks that they may be on DHS's radar should have a copy of those papers, should have just sort of a plan. What happens if they do wrongly arrest me? But they're so out of control. And, there's a way, I get it. Trump won the election. Kamala Harris didn't. And he ran on this. And, President Eisenhower had this operation that I won't say the name of it, that deported a lot of people. But we're in the year that we are. We respect people's civil liberties now. There are laws in place. There's interpretations of our Constitution in place. There is a constitutional way to do many of the things that Trump wants to do, and the things that are unconstitutional to do, he can't do. And yes, he could increase the number of deportations. The irony of all of this is that Obama was known as the deporter in chief. Now, his goal was laudatory, in my view. He thought, if I do the enforcement piece, Congress will do the path to citizenship piece.
Sure.
And in that sense, he was either a little naive or a little too trusting, because the Republicans never did the citizenship or even a pathway to any kind of legalization. And the whole thing fell apart. And meanwhile, Obama, I think the numbers are right, he deported more people than Trump. Now, Trump would say, well, I deterred them in other ways, blah, blah, blah. And then it did really skyrocket under Biden. For whatever reason, there were like twice as many people came into the country. And we can sit here for 2 hours and analyze why that happened. But the fact is that it was twice as much as Obama, twice as much as Trump. And the irony was that Trump was a little bit lower in deportations than Obama. And so Biden's number of people who came into the country were more than double those of Obama. And I think the Democrats saw that peril, too late, the political peril too late. And I think what Biden was thinking was that the left, the people who are the really strident pro-immigration advocates would form a third party or would do something. And of course, with 2020 hindsight, probably his ticket, either him or Harris, would have been elected. The left, yeah, they could have run somebody. They ran somebody against Clinton, and guess what? Clinton won. And I think they ran somebody against Obama from the left, and Obama won.
I was reading the story yesterday, David Katz, about Democrats, a few Democrats who are saying, listen, all of this focus on Kilmar Abrego Garcia is taking away from other issues like the economy, issues that matter to more Americans. That why are we focusing on this one guy, which now turns into two guys and a U.S. citizen who's being told to leave? But why are we focusing on this issue, which is smaller and maybe doesn't impact more Americans directly? And instead of focusing on the bigger issues. And so there's a swing to have focus turn away from these immigration issues. I don't think that's wise.
I saw some right-wing commentator who said, ha, you Democrats picked the wrong horse. Right. But, we didn't really pick Abrego Garcia as our horse. They spirit these people out of the country. They defy a federal judge's order right there. If you're going to defy a federal judge's order, okay, no matter who this guy is, no matter who this guy, I use the example of Miranda, and I think one of your smart viewers sent us something that said, Miranda was charged with rape. He might have been tried. He was charged with a bunch of really bad crimes. But guess what? He had a right to have his Miranda warnings. And we have Miranda warnings now for all sorts of people, and it's been extremely beneficial. And people don't blab stuff. People talk themselves. People say you can't talk yourself out of trouble, but you can talk yourself into trouble. There are just innumerable people who talk themselves into trouble. They were unsophisticated. They got, their words were twisted by police officers. They wrote them down wrong. They didn't use tape recordings. We have Miranda warnings. That doesn't mean Miranda was a model citizen. If this guy isn't a model citizen, they're trying to play up this Homan guy, the same guy who doesn't care what courts say. He seems to care a lot about what he says. He said the guy's a wife beater. Now, he had a domestic violence and a restraining order against him. So that means that everybody, think it through, that means everybody who has a domestic violence order, even though a federal judge says, you have a right to stay in this country, you may not be deported. If the government can not pay attention to that judge's order, they cannot pay attention to any order that matters in your life. If there's no respect for the rule of law and no respect for judges. So you can say hard cases, but this really is not a hard case, because if this is supposed to be an MS-13, remember, prove it in court. Right. You hear the DHS secretary, all of these people. By the way, she should watch her purse a little more carefully than make these unsupported, no evidentiary claims. Because I don't know if you've heard this one, but the head of DHS is sitting in a restaurant and somebody steals her purse. And she's got her purse like unattended at her feet. This guy is sitting like kind of close to her. I guess she's gabbing away. Hey, we're not going to present any evidence in court, but boy, we're making these guys look terrible. And when you go through TSA, you get to see a picture of me. I'm all gussied up in the picture. You got to look at me every time you go through a TSA. And she's talking about whatever she's talking about. And where her security detail is, I don't know. But this guy steals her purse.
$3,000 in the purse.
Not just that, think what else she could have. She could have her phone with all kinds of confidential stuff. She can have confidential papers in there. She could be like another Hegseth who doesn't protect our secrets. Apparently, they've recovered this purse. But, some investigator, if they haven't fired all the inspectors general, including the one of her department, be kind of interesting what was in her purse. And did she have things that she shouldn't have had? And where is her security detail? They probably had 10 guys running around talking on those little thing, acting like they're in some movie or something like that. And meanwhile, they're not even watching the protectee who has her purse stolen from like a foot away from her foot, right there in the restaurant.
Like no one knows what they're doing. Something else.
This group is so incompetent. This is such a bunch of Keystone cops.
Another example, apparently they've released the address of Abrego Garcia's wife. So now she's getting threats. She had to move to a safe house because the government released her place of residence. And so now she's having to take steps to keep herself and her family safe. It's like they don't know what they're doing.
There's also 1,500 people who were good for the riot at the Capitol, where 5 people died and all these assaults of police officers were done. They were all given pardons by Trump. Even Vance said, oh, we're not going to pardon the violent ones. Guess what? They pardoned all the violent ones. And people said, wow, it's a really terrifying situation. This isn't my expression. This is many commentators. I think even Bill Maher, before he went to the White House, I think even Bill Maher called them brown shirts. So there's 1,500 called by people in big media, brown shirts, who are running. 1 or 2 of them has already been killed. Because they got himself in another violent confrontation, and that one, the one person got shot, and you remember the story. She's a woman who was trying to break through. If she'd have broken through that glass, she would have let that whole mob in there to maraud the congressman, worse than maraud, kill Mike Pence. They also wanted to kill Pelosi. So that guy who stopped her and her gang behind her, but they tried to make a martyr, out of her. But anyway, this person, I guess, tried to do some kind of robbery or something like that. They figured, my God, I brought to the Capitol national TV and got off pretty much scot-free. I guess he served a little bit of time in jail, but he didn't serve his full sentence. And, a lot of those people are saying now that because they have a pardon, they can go get a gun. They're pardoned. They never were convicted of anything in the eyes of the law. Why can't they go get a gun? It's such a scary situation. And so to be someone like her, who has your name, this having your name released is like, a big arrow being what do they call it, crosshairs drawn on you, because there are so many people, including these people, who are running around. I'm sure that in all the states, I think she's in Maryland, I'm sure that all of those states have gotten tabs on those people. If they're not doing anything wrong, that's fine. But if they are doing something wrong, I think anyone living in Maryland, like this situation, California, New York, I'm sure the locals have kept tabs on that. If not, that's terrible police work.
You would think, David Katz, that with all the focus on immigration cases, that you would need immigration judges, right? We had a shortage of immigration judges. You would think that, I mean, I guess unless you don't care what judges have to say, but even as we see more and more cases regarding immigrants and deportations, there's another round of firings that hit immigration courts in Massachusetts, in California, in Louisiana. The Trump administration downsizing, at least 8 immigration judges got notices that they'd be put on leave and their employment terminated this month, actually yesterday or the day before, according to people familiar with these firings. And the judges who got notices were not given any reason as to why they were being let go. They were at the end of their probationary periods and fired. Don't we need immigration judges? What's going on?
Let me speculate that these were judges who were handpicked by the Trump administration as ones that they thought would not be friendly to the Trump agenda. They were picked during the Biden administration. If they're probationary, right, they were picked within the last year and a half. I'm sure they went through, I'm speculating that they went through them and said, we don't like that one. We think that one's a liberal. We think that one's a DEI. And they probably fired them all on based on, viewpoint discrimination, which they say that they're so against when it happens at Harvard University or something else. But it's probably this viewpoint thing. And this is the way to properly understand, I think, almost all the probationary employees who've been fired in every federal agency, including these probationary ones. This is the old pork barrel. This is the old spoils system. Trump wants to put his people in there. So there's no real desire for government efficiency or anything like that. He figures the people who are probationary, hired under Biden, recent employees, probably he's got stats that show a lot of them are, quote, DEI, which just means that they're women or members of minority groups. Yeah. And he's going to put some of his Trumpy white men in those jobs, true believers, MAGA followers. And he's trying to, this happened. We talked about this, happened before Eisenhower. This was the way that it went. This was how it rolled. With the winner, go the spoils. And you would put all the people from your campaign, whether they were stupid or smart, and you didn't care if they were stupid because they were loyal to you and they were going to do your bidding. And that's who he has in mind to be the new immigration judges, people with Trumpy views. That's who he has in mind to work at the EPA, people who don't really want to pursue at least a vigorous EPA enforcement policy. And that's what's really going on. The funny thing about Trump is that you should be disgusted, but you shouldn't be surprised, because what Musk did, this idea of why did he want to get in the records? I think he wanted to get into those records so that he could make use of them, either against political or business enemies or to line his pocket. And I think that's what the investigations will show. But he did it fast enough. Some of the federal judges, it seemed like they didn't really kind of get what he was doing. All the federal judges should have issued restraining orders until they could see what exactly was going on, because he didn't need very long, him and his minions, Kim, to go tap into some of them and to get a whole lot of secrets. I mean, why he needed to be in people's medical records at all? You need to be in a person's personal medical records to figure out how you're going to save money on waste, abuse, and fraud in medical care. And the way to do it is to go after people like Senator Scott, the Republican senator from Florida, who made millions and millions of dollars, was in the middle of it, at the very least, a civil lawsuit claiming that he had profited and his corporation by millions and millions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse. And I've been doing this for a long time. And when I was a federal prosecutor, we loved to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. We couldn't get enough money to get enough agents, to get really talented agents, really well-trained ones who understood the whole health billing process. They've always been short on that. Just like they've always been short on really talented IRS agents who are being cut back. They're being cut back for another reason. They're just being cut back because they wanted. That is one agency that they just wanted to stop doing what it does, the really good, careful audits of very rich people and huge corporations. And what's going to happen is they'll just get the low-hanging fruit. They'll get the working man, and because he can't hide, he can't, right? They're going to have the guy who says that he only has says he has 10 dependents, and the guy really, it's only him and his wife, and they'll get that guy for claiming the 8 dependents, which he shouldn't be doing, should not be doing that. And meanwhile, these huge billionaires and these huge corporations, you've seen the numbers. There's like a huge amount that's not collected that ought to be collected. They ought to, really rich people ought to pay their taxes, and Trump wants to take us in a different direction. And of course, that benefits all the billionaires. It benefits, Trump benefits them in other ways, but it benefits all of them because they're all in huge tax bracket, and they want to be in a lower tax bracket, and they don't want to be scrutinized by the IRS.
I have 2 more stories that I want to quickly slide past
lightning
you.
Kim, I love you. I love the lightning round.
Lightning round.
Any legal story you don't want my analysis of?
There's a meme coin dinner that Trump is putting together. He's asked 220 of the top meme coin holders to this dinner, and when he did this, the meme coin price of the Trump crypto went up by 50%. There's a concern that there's some type of conflict of interest here, because you cannot, it seems like he's selling access to the presidency, selling access to the White House, making money off of his office. I know that the coin is called, it's $Trump, and the price of it jumped more than 50% after the top 25 holders of this coin, it was announced they would get an ultra exclusive VIP reception with President Trump, as well as a special tour. Is this legal, David?
Well, say what you want about Senator Menendez from New Jersey and his wife. It's so nice and easy, right? They give you the gold bars, right. They give you the Mercedes, right? Is this bribery? Probably Trump has had some legal advisors look at it because he doesn't want to get charged with bribery. There's probably not a sufficient quid pro quo for this to be, the Supreme Court has cut back on what constitutes bribery, made it actually fairly hard for federal prosecutors to prove bribery. But the only thing that I would say, and I'm not a stock picker, although I told some people to dump Tesla. Now, all the people that I didn't tell, I told them, why don't you go to the Mark Thompson show? We've been saying that you cannot poison your own brand like that. It looked like he must have been going short. He found somebody and he shorted Tesla because everything he did, Musk, was designed. It was obviously going to drive down the price of Tesla. Why didn't I tell you it was going to go down 71%? Tesla went down 71%.
Yeah.
Why didn't I tell you that? We told you that on the Mark Thompson show. And if you looked at other media, you would have seen that too. So, if you're really going to buy a Trump coin, okay, I think most people just consider, I love Trump and I'm willing to send him $100 and I don't expect to ever get it back again. If you have that attitude that you want to spend $100 on the coin at whatever level it is, and you don't expect to ever get it back, but you love Trump, you can buy one with Melania too. You can buy a Melania one.
Yeah,
isn't that
really
sweet?
exciting.
If she's the one that you really think is like a great first lady, like you think Trump is really a great president, you can buy her coin. And we used to do the penny stocks, when I was in the U.S. Attorney's office, and the penny stocks were a big deal. And you knew they were always going to go down to a penny, but it's pump and dump. So you do all these things to pump them up, and then the insiders sell them. And then, of course, there's no there. So remember, you're not only investing in a Trump thing or a Melania thing, but you're investing in crypto. Crypto's not money. You can call me, you can write me, whatever you want. Crypto's not money. And the only thing that's really important to stress to people all the time is that there's no bailout coming. We're not bailing this thing out, whether there's a government buys it as a reserve or whatever. We are not bailing this out. This is like, remember in The Big Short, the stripper had 4 houses, we're not bailing out your 4 houses, okay? You may be a stripper who thinks that this is the greatest thing in the world and your crypto is up, okay? But when your crypto goes down, and it's not just strippers, it's people who invest like money that their wife and kids need. But we just can't bail you out. This is tulips back in the tulip boom. This is a highly speculative investment. And if you want to invest in it, it's a free country. But the country's not, the taxpayer, I hope the Democrats fight that till our last breath, that we're not bailing people out on this. Okay, do this with the money that you have to lose. Do this because you love Trump and you know it's money down the, down the Trump.
Lastly, I wanted to tell you that yesterday I got Venmo'd $156.09.
And I'm mad at you. I'm mad at you because you didn't publicize on the show that this wasn't a scam and that we should all do this.
What?
I didn't know. I thought, did I
You
ever
put in for it, but you put in.
Did I? I don't even remember putting in for it.
There's a way you must have clicked something, but a lot of us are scared to click something because we're so sure that it's a scam. Right. We're going to get on some mailing list. We're going to get all kinds of junk. But if this was a good one, so tell us when there's another good one.
I thought that it was a scam. I had to look up, like, is someone trying to scam me by, like, is this for real? And it turns out it is. It's this clear settlement of this, the Reuters, Thomas Reuters Corporation, that was selling people's information. And there was a $27 million settlement that they had to give money to all of the class action lawsuit people that I guess clicked a button or some way signed up to say, yeah, you sold my information. So apparently my information is worth $156 and it's legit.
Well, I think
thank you. I'll take it.
I think Thomson Reuters and some of these other things, they have all of these, they have these lists too. You have to be really, all these things, they have like super lawyers, super doctors. They just had a thing in the LA Times, something, and it's not a publication of the LA Times. So apparently somebody bought this thing. We used to have a thing called suckers lists. And when I was a prosecutor, the suckers lists they put you in a directory, right? And then everybody who's in the directory of great lawyers or great doctors or great insurance salespeople, they're the ones who paid for the ad. But the only things that's in the directory is the people who paid for the ad. And then they send it to you to think, wow, the whole world saw this. And the whole world really didn't see it. And those were called directory scams. So, just people watch out, people watch out. But there are people, I guess, like Thomson Reuters, who it was worth doing these things, these promotions. You put your name in, you want to be in super lawyers or super doctors or something like that. They scam lawyers. If you think that they don't scam lawyers, they scam lawyers. And a lot of doctors are great at medicine, but a lot of them don't have a lot of financial sense. That was always a thing. Whenever you found a tax shelter that was like bogus or a penny stock, you found a lot of people with MD or DDS after their name who'd fallen for it.
Yeah. This was selling addresses, DMV records to police, governments, and corporations, and selling private information. They got busted for it. So there you go. Yeah. David
Well, good
Katz.
for you, though. Good for you.
Yeah.
I want you to come down here and say hello to me and Mark in Southern California next time you're down here. And now we're treating you to lunch or dinner, and you've got $150 toward your trip.
There you go. I'm on my way. David Katz, thank you for swinging by the show. I always appreciate talking to you. You're awesome. Thank you.
It's great to be with you. You're awesome too. Take care.
Thank you. We'll see you next week. Bye, David Katz. Always love it when he comes by the show. And now we are over time. And I think I just appreciate so much Luis throwing in $5 to the show, saying, Professor Katz, I know a little about Rich Lyons, new chancellor at Cal. Is he up to standing firm against Trump, or are we going to crumble like Colombia? I wish I'd seen it. I am so sorry I didn't get to ask him. We'll ask him next week, Luis. I'll make a note of it. Thank you so much for the $5 and for the contributions to the show. Thank you to Chaplain Fred for contributing to the show as well. Tomorrow, Michael Schur will be in the captain's seat, and I'll be along for the ride, as will Albert. Friday Fabulous Florida on tap. We'll talk to Jim Avila about politics, and Michael Snyder will be along with movie reviews and streaming reviews, and it's going to be a great Friday on the Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, I think he reviewed a ton of great movies last week. I think I'm going to see Sinners on Saturday.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I saw a lot of good things about that one. He really liked that one, so I can't wait to see it.
It's always good when you hear him like something, you think, oh, I gotta see that one. So
And I'm not usually a movie guy, so this is gonna be a new experience for me.
Thanks for all the help today, Albert. I appreciate it.
Anytime. My internet went out there. I think one of our videos got cut short.
It did. It kind of froze there, but that's all right. It all worked out.
We made it.
Yeah, we made it through. The After Party Live is next. It's Trivia Thursday, so join me over there. I'll put the link in the chat.
I'm
and until then,
for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.